lot of candidates, many good candidates, some maybe not as well known as others. Before we went to break, we were talking about the CEO of the BC Chamber of Commerce running. You represent the Taxpayers Federation in BC. Kris, what are your thoughts on him?
Well, we'd like to see somebody who has some understanding of what businesses have been going through in the past 2 years, especially when it comes to government regulation and taxation. And if being former head of the chamber helps that sounds great. Our issue, though, is once you get into power or once you even become leader, you have to stick to your promises and you have to stick to your principles. And so this whole idea of, staffers fighting back and forth and nitpicking and people piling on, most average, hardworking British Columbians don't care about that stuff. Around 40% of their incomes right now are going to taxes at 3 various levels of government. A lot of people can't afford to buy a house, even with 2 people professionally working in British Columbia. It's awful. And we pay the highest gasoline prices in North America, and our cost of living through natural gas because of the carbon taxes are going up. The last thing they want to hear about is infighting and political nitpicking. And so whomever gets to be leader, we hope that they make sure that they stick to these smaller government, more accountable government, low tax principles, because we need this sort of change.
So Kris, is affordability the top issue with this leadership? Obviously, it played a huge role in the federal election that we just wrapped up a few months ago. In this leadership, is that a top issue?
Absolutely. It's enormous. Every person I talk to in British Columbia mentions affordability off the top of their head, especially now with what's happening federally with inflation. And keep in mind that the carbon taxes don't just hit you at the fuel pump. Most people heat their homes with natural gas.
Right.
And by the time all these carbon taxes are jacked up to $170 a ton, it's going to cost you around $900 more per year to heat your house. That's a new house with full insulation. That's just in the carbon tax. So folks have got to stick to these issues.
Laurie, what about COVID issues? What about vaccine mandates, vaccine passports? BC seemed to emerge out of the first, 3 lockdowns. I don't even know if you had a lockdown. Kids were in school. They never were pulled the first year. Kudos to BC. But they escaped COVID relatively unscathed. And then we saw sea change this summer, where now you have the passports. There are more impositions now being put on by Bonnie Henry, the Chief Medical Officer of Health there. How are BC Liberal membership, how are they reacting to this? Is anybody running on these issues?
Well, the only female candidate, Renee Merrifield, MLA for Kelowna Mission, was health critic, and she waffled on mandatory vaccinations for healthcare professionals and on mask mandates, and was severely criticized in the press for it. So there is a fairly significant segment of social conservatives who do not like mask mandates and mandatory vaccinations. And in fact, Bonnie Henry told me twice in caucus, people will not be required to be vaccinated. And I pushed her on it because, I felt that would become an issue. And she said, I said it already to you, people will not be required to vaccinate. And this last weekend, they laid off 1,500 healthcare workers who are badly needed in the healthcare system because they've refused to be vaccinated. So I don't really understand that. And I think there's something of a backlash. Overshadowing this is the health of the coalition. Who can keep the coalition together? That is the big political question. It's not even a question of policy. So you need a leader who is tall enough to straddle the divide, the growing divide between conservative and liberal members of the BC Liberal Party. And I don't really see anyone today who is up to that task and who has said, I'm willing to do that. Perhaps Ellis Ross, but that's the only one I can see.
Wow. So this sounds a lot of like when Stephen Harper became the head of the Canadian Alliance and he had to keep all these different factions together. We only have 15 seconds, Laurie, but how will the party stand in 3 years' time against the NDP?
If they don't keep together as a coalition, they will fall again to the NDP. Sadly, but it's true.
So I guess maybe the NDP is watching on the sidelines, maybe popping some popcorn and seeing what happens.
They are rubbing their hands in glee over this. Absolutely.